Hello, everybody, and welcome to the newest episode of Circuit 42. Previously on X-Men. It's been a while. Now on X-Men, 1997, X-Men 97. I am your host, Ian, and I am here with my co-host and professional wizard, Michael Martinez.
Not much of a wizard these days, but howdy everybody. It's a little weird doing the whole video shtick. It's been a while for me, so I had to throw some geek shit on. Definitely did not have the full like X-Men shirt prepared like Ian, but I'm gonna have to remedy that soon.
Yes, I did this for the show. Yeah, this wasn't just my clothes I put on for the day.
Yeah, maybe we'll get somebody who's played or done a really great cosplay of Vampirilla on at some point, and it'll just seem like Kismet that you have Vampirilla behind you.
Vampire you said.
All right,
Back
okay.
to the X-Men.
So we got to focus up. We got to focus up. Yeah, because we definitely don't have any like weird, kind of BDSM kind of dressed strappiness in X-Men. That just doesn't happen.
Right? No, Chris Claremont, who's that?
I mean, like I was, but we were talking earlier about like doing like rewatches and whatnot. And I swear to God, when I was rewatching like the 90, what are we gonna call it? The OG, the 92,
X-Men,
96.
X-Men animated.
That's the animated series, X-Men the animated series. So from the 90s X-Men. All right. Um, when fucking Lilandra shows up, first of all, like
I
she
do see
shows
a
up
problem.
and she starts like showing up and she's like all like oh Xavier, and Xavier's like what the fuck are you, you're like some kind of like mantis looking little bug thing. And I swear to God, I'm not sure if there was like a scene that happened with it, but like Juggernaut shows up and he grabs Landra, and then like it switches to the next episode, and then she's wearing like her little skimpy fishnet thing, and I was like, when the fuck did that happen? And
So
then
don't you
Eric
know who I
Duran
am?
pops up in his little like hussy midriff thing, with all of his straps and stuff, and I was like, oh, that's just how they roll in the elite fucking Shi'ar life, I guess. So yeah. Speaking of midriffs, there were people who lost their shit because there was some midriff action. But yeah, I don't want to like get too far ahead. So, like me and Ian were talking about the fact that, we were kind of like doing a little bit of rewatching. We have both seen the first and second episode at at least once. I saw the first episode for a second time. I was trying to rewatch both of them just to get a little bit fresh and take some notes. But so Ian, what's your like just what's your takeaway from the first couple of episodes? Just like real quick, and then maybe we can like dive into more detail.
So I'm going to say this right now. This is exactly what it should need to be in
Yeah,
terms of like quality, in terms of continuing from the original show while doing a kind of a soft reboot, in terms of changes both for social reasons for the show and for in terms of this kind of cool mix of modern mixed with retro that kind of sums up the show because there are a lot of moments that harken back to the 90s. But in terms of storytelling, there are also a lot of, I'm going to say right now, there are definitely improvements from the original show that
yeah.
can be only looked at in hindsight of shows like that and other superhero shows before and after. Um, I appreciate how much of the original voice cast we got back. And funny enough, there's a little bit of confusion we're going to talk about later on in terms of some returning voice actors who were like, wait, they returned, but who are they playing? And we're going to talk about I'm not necessarily I don't necessarily want to be considered a gatekeeper, but we're going to talk about people posting memes before actually doing the research.
I'm gonna assume this has something to do with Rogue's ass, but that
Well, Rogue
so
and people being asses. Yeah.
yeah, let's do that. We're not just talking about Gambit here when we talk about Rogue's ass. Um, Which, by the way, when I was doing a rewatch, every time that fucking Wolverine called Gambit Gumbo, I was like, what kind of insult is that?
Hillbilly.
Is it because they were like trying really hard not to say white trash or hillbilly or something like that, and they're just like, shut your mouth, Gumbo, and it's like, what does that even mean?
I would just call him
That's
redneck.
not a that's not an insult. Like, calm down. I think it's because like Wolverine is kind of like already like anything that you could call Gambit, you could call Wolverine like 10 times over. He's like, what is he? Oh, is he some kind of like backwards hillbilly? It's like, dude, you literally will go hang out in the woods with wolves and shit
Well,
every couple of
actually,
months.
shit with wolves.
Like every now and then when you walk in on, Gene sucking Cyclops, you have to run off to the woods and yeah. Or like he
She,
doesn't even have to walk in, he just smells it. He's just like, oh shit.
she's just
Uh
going outside to go. She's just going outside, enjoying the air. It's like, what the fuck is that Wolverine? Is he peeing with wolves? What the
yeah.
like? Just don't
So
even ask. Just be like, I gotta go back to the house and blow Cyclops.
yeah, that's just how it goes. But yeah, okay, okay. So yeah, I definitely have to
This is our
agree. This
explicit
is like
content warning.
this is a little yeah, a little bit late for that warning, but I would definitely agree. Um and this is kind of it's very tricky to pull off something like this because there's a lot of that going around where people and when I say people, I mean like the executives, the people with money, people who make these kind of like entertainment decisions. They are realizing that that the millennials, the people who grew up in the late 80s, 90s, and all that, and that are bringing all this shit back so that they can tap into that nostalgia. Oh, they got some spending money now, so let's see what we can get out of that. So there's been a lot of tapping into that. We've seen all sorts of like reboots, and not a whole lot of them are successful. The ones that try to tap into that, even
Oh,
ones
you mean what? The
where
Animaniacs? What?
like yeah, like not it's everything. Like they did, they're doing like RoboCop, they're doing Ghostbusters, they're bringing back like even like Michael Keaton's 1989 Batman in The Flash. There's so much of nostalgia that's being tapped into from the late 80s and early 90s era that it obviously doesn't always work out. So there's always going to be like that bit of like soul searching and trying to figure out. I mean, but first of all, in order to do some soul searching, you have to have a soul of the material. You have to understand what it is, and a lot of times they don't. They will kind of just use the name, but not really respect what it was about.
And
So
oh, sorry.
it's so tricky for them to pull that off because how do you bring that back without being too, I guess, like fan servicey? Like what is the right level at which you approach that? And that's so tricky to do. So I think that they pulled it off really well. They definitely brought in some new elements and some new angles, and you can kind of get the sense that they definitely went back and kind of did like a little bit of retrospective, and they were saying to themselves, what are some things that we could have done a little bit better? What are some things that we could have cleaned up a little bit? And you can tell like right away when they have the intro and they want to make sure that you're feeling all the feels that you did when you were watching this shit on Saturday morning when you were a kid,
And seeing
that
them recreating
they
those different moments
yeah,
from
that this is
the
back.
animated series. And
So
I'm gonna say sorry, I'm gonna interrupt real quick. Seeing
go ahead.
Bishop and Morph finally having the credit on the title was nice.
Yeah, that was really cool. And I wasn't really like a big like Morph person, obviously from like the initial show because he didn't really do much. Um, I
Thought
was
his power
definitely
was
somebody
cool
who,
because
yeah,
that was my introduction to X-Men
you would get like more into Morph. I think, or rather, I got more into Morph like from like Exiles and whatnot, reading the
and
comics.
Age of Apocalypse. Yeah,
I honestly haven't read Age of Apocalypse
You and I are reading
because
AOA for for a future podcast.
because like we were talking about before, like you're more of like the like a 80s 90s X-Men fan. Um, I didn't get into X-Men until like it was more like, late 90s, early 2000s, just because I think that's what about when I started reading comics. That's when, Wizard
Movies
was
came out.
out, and I was kind of, getting into it, the Morrison era with Frank Quietly. So they really, kind of caught my attention with the X Men comics, but just the core of what they had, still rings true, and that's something that they brought to this series. So I really think that they did a great job on this. They did a good job on every level, just the animation, the voice acting, like the characterization, and they had to do it really well because they know how much people love the X-Men. They know how much people love this show, and they 100% nailed it.
So
So if you want
here's
to
a
go into
question.
something a little bit deeper, go
Here's
ahead.
a question. Are we doing spoilers?
I think, if you give a shit about X-Men, you've seen it already. So
Yep.
let's talk about it.
So spoilers ahoy. This is your spoiler warning. Um, so the show pulls a lot from from like the Claremont Louis Simonson era from Marvel from X-Men in the 80s. Big thing being Madeline Pryor. Madeline Pryor was a clone of Jean Grey. Initially, Madeline Pryor was designed by Chris Claremont after Jean Grey died in the Dark Phoenix saga to basically you have new girlfriend for Cyclops, very similar. Literally appears on the day that literally appears on the day that Jean dies. Like she wakes up in another location when Jean dies, and you're like, oh shit, that's not good at all. But the thing that he wanted to do was actually not have her be directly tied in, and actually have Cyclops get married and leave the X-Men, and actually have his story end that way, and have a happy ending for the character. Comics, be what they will, did not want to do this. Comics, be what they will, is Jim Shooter was like, we need to bring back Jean Grey, even though I told you that she had to die because of the fact that she killed a bunch of people and ate a planet. Which, admittedly, eating a planet filled with broccoli people, while it sounds hilarious, it's legitimately fair that, you know what, you just ate like a billion people. You may not, we're not going to give you a slap on the wrist, which was originally what Chris Claremont apparently wanted to do. Which is funny because in the animated series they kind of give her a slap on the wrist, and then she just comes back later and everyone's like, "Hey, how's it going? So I'm here to eat a lot of people." That's what
In the
we're.
animated series, did she actually like I don't think she actually destroyed
She did
like a
not eat
solar
the.
system in the way, right?
She did not eat the broccoli people in the animated
Yeah,
series.
yeah.
Um,
But I think that
but
was a little bit too that was too much for the animated.
yeah. Also just sounds funny to say eat the broccoli people. But so what ends up happening is that you find out that Madeline Pryor starts getting all these visions, and Cyclops actually has these visions of her as the Dark Phoenix, and you're like, what the fuck is happening? And this is what eventually leads into the storyline Inferno, because Madeline Pryor has a daughter that has a son, and that son is Cable. And then what happens from there is the Inferno storyline where she tries to sacrifice her own son, and Jean Grey and Cyclops have to stop her. And it wasn't until that story, till like a couple years back during Krakoa, that they finally brought her character back and they gave her an arc and they brought her back to the good side. How they did that, bringing her back from trying to sacrifice her baby to, hey, this is cool, kind of odd, but weird enough
Yeah.
it actually worked. But yeah, that was interesting seeing that. And if things play out, people are going to be surprised who don't have that background with the characters.
Yeah. And honestly, like I didn't read that original story. So, but obviously I've read pretty much like all of the Krakoan era. So, and I'm
So you know about
reading
the
I
Goblin
was
Queen and
actually
Madeline Pryor during New
yeah, I
Mutants.
was actually reading like the Dark X-Men series last night, which has Madeline Pryor in it, who by the way has probably one of the most in practical costumes and all of all of it.
Um, I
Um,
don't see the problem.
yeah, it's even worse than that because it's like at least that is like it's basically Vampirilla has like sexy suspenders on
I give
versus
credit to Mark Silvestri and Chris Claremont for what they did for equality purposes with that costume. Do you know what they did for equality
uh,
purposes with that costume?
what did they do?
Hold on, because they actually reference this in the
You, you know what
Marauder
happens, right?
series.
This is one of those moments where I posted this meme before. It's from the fucking Aviator.
Because you know what? If one person's gonna wear it, then their boy toy is definitely gonna wear it too.
Oh yes, with a little crop top. Um,
Which I give
but
them
yeah,
credit for. Because
I post
how often does that happen in comics?
the this fucking scene
I
from
think
the
he's actually
Aviator
wearing less clothes than she is in this, oddly enough.
when they're trying to like convince Howard Hughes that he can't just make like a breast centric movie, and he's just like they're
That's a
just like
lie.
Howard, they're just like you think, really think they're gonna make you like make a whole movie that's about tits? And he's like, yeah, who doesn't like tits? And it just like flashes to the Motion Picture Association of America board, just like giving him a little finger wag. So he has to kind of explain his position. So I imagine that's Chris Claremont. Just
Funny thing is, I know female fans of the Goblin Queen of Metal probably are like, what was with their weird attempt to give her the censored cover the under boob costume they did for Secret Wars?
yeah,
You saw that, right?
there's uh the under boob is strong with this one, but okay. So let's
They literally put
okay.
a piece
We're
of
getting
fabric that goes from here to here,
yeah
and
we're
then
getting
even
distracted.
I don't know what you're
We're
talking
getting
about.
distracted by boobs.
We don't have our own
So
personal
anyway,
biases. I don't know what you're talking about.
we so I was gonna say I think it's because I hadn't read that series. I think it still kind of shows that the show the 97 is in a really good spot because as I was doing like my rewatch of the animated series from back in the day, it kind of occurred to me like, wow, they are kind of just like blazing through some of these story arcs, right? Because the X-Men
Yeah,
have been around since the 60s, and it's like, oh, is there a danger of them catching up and finding out like like what are we gonna do? Trying to have in this moment where like have like a Game of Thrones thing, where it kind of starts to go off the rails when it starts to get too far ahead. But the fact that Inferno is a little bit old and they're just barely getting to it still kind of shows that there's a lot of good stories for them to
yeah.
mine.
Because where we are is actually basically right after Dark Phoenix. Because most of season 5 is just like sporadic stuff, which is why it feels so weird.
Yeah,
That and it's bad. And but right now like you said, we're basically mining post Dark Phoenix saga. And there's a lot of good content because people forget that Chris Claremont's X-Men run ran for 17 years.
yeah.
Yeah.
And there's just like it really makes you wonder like are they gonna catch up to like Morrison's run? Are they gonna catch up to Astonishing? Are they gonna catch up to like Phoenix 5 stuff? Are they gonna like there's so much that they could potentially get into if the show just if it keeps running for as long as the original did, if it still gets like another 5 seasons, which would be amazing, and it would give them so much room to explore all these other characters and to hopefully have some of these other like weird little cameos like the original one did. I think I saw like a little snippet of an interview that said like, oh, we're gonna have these kind of cameos because
The
Spider-Man
morph
cameo,
cameos.
yeah,
Can we talk
and
about the
not
morph
just like
cameos real quick?
yeah,
Because
like I thought it was really cool that he was able to because in the like the 90s one, it really felt like he was just basically like Mystique.
yeah,
He
and
wasn't really
seeing
like demonstrating the powers. He was just kind of like standing in as like a person.
dude that Archangel pit moment.
Yeah, that was it's like so there was that was so fucking cool.
And
But
I'm
like
so when Lady
I'm
Deathstrike
so
popped
glad.
up, I'm like, what the fuck is Lady Deathstrike doing here? And then I'm like, oh shit. Because for a
Yeah,
second I'm like, wait, why is Lady Deathstrike here?
the fact that they're letting like Morph be cool is pretty awesome. And I hope he's gonna be able to do his thing with the cameos. It was a little bit uh fucked up that he his first
But
little
it's
cameo was
Xavier.
like Xavier, and he's
What the?
just
Yeah,
like
I'm like, dude, you're an asshole right now,
he
man.
just died.
Oh,
Uh,
can we talk about the first episode, by the way? Because it's
I will
interesting.
the
Because
so the first episode is definitely the one where it's very much like reminiscent of like the
the Night
first
of the
episode of
Sentinels.
the
Yeah.
original. Yeah, because like you're bringing in that like yuppie character who doesn't like know anything or want to know anything or have to actually do anything with the X-Men. And in this case, it's Roberto da Costa. It's Sunspot.
And
So obviously, in the OG, it was Jubilee.
seeing her in that role by basically like learning from what she did. And
Yeah,
I love that one of the first things she does is shove him and basically shove him into the danger room. Because it's like, yeah, that's the first thing that basically happened to her. And so seeing Wolverine pop up in the danger room, like that's how you do the throwback without it being obvious, without it being like post trilogy Star Wars.
yeah. And it's really it was a really smart thing to do, and I'm kind of disappointed that Sunspot doesn't hang around a little bit longer because I feel like that was a really good opportunity to give Jubilee a little bit of growth and show that she's not just like the new kid. She's got an opportunity to kind of like show somebody else what the X-Men are about, and it definitely like changes your dynamic when you're less of a student and more of a teacher. And to let her grow and let her be in that role is definitely something that's going to be important for her character because it kind of establishes that there are going to be more X-Men, more inexperienced ones coming in, and there's going to have to be like a new generation to kind of like guide them.
Well, it
And
reminds me of the
Jubilee's going to have
comic
to be a part
Generation
of that.
X because in the
Yeah,
comic Generation X, she was with the X-Men for a couple of years, and they're like, "We need you. We are going to put you in the team. It's going to be all new Young Mutants. We want to put you." They basically did a Kitty Pryde with her, but and basically are like, "Yeah, you're going to be in this new class," and it's like, and I love it because even though she's only basically been in there in comic time for about a year or two, the whole running gag throughout the whole series is, so when I was with the X-Men, blah blah blah, and one of the characters actually says, "Yeah, you're always telling me these when I was with the X-Men stories and complaining at us." And she said, "Yeah, all I was going to say is when I was with the X-Men, we didn't leave our skin laying around from our mutant powers because it's really gross and tacky." And I love that they're kind of putting her in that role on the show with Sunspot, where it's like you're still kind of a junior X-Men, but you got enough experience to where you could be like, "Dude, stop being a smartass."
yeah. It's like I've learned from personal experience, like don't be a piece of shit. Like you're going to have and it's kind of good. Like even like Wolverine, like kind of like calls out Sunspot for being a disrespectful piece of shit, and he's just like, give her due because she's earned it. She's been on the team. She's been somebody who's like fought all these fights with us. So yeah, like show some respect, motherfucker.
Oh, and the actor who's playing him, his name is Guy Agostini, who's playing Sunspot. I haven't seen he hasn't been in a lot of he hasn't been in a lot of notable stuff. I think this is actually his biggest role that he's been in because most of his credits in the 5 years he's been acting are mostly short films. So I kind of
Yeah.
I appreciate that they're bringing in new actors for this, or at least actors who don't have like a giant credit yet.
Did Sunspot not cameo in the original one?
Sun, I don't remember Sunspot was in the original, but people tend to forget that Sunspot was in Days of Future Past.
Or are you talking about the movie? Or are you talking about like, the arc from the original?
The movie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, he was in that.
everyone just thought he was Human Torch. You know what it was? I think what you're confusing is that he was in X-Men Evolution.
Yeah, he was in X-Men Evolution, but I'm just wondering if maybe they threw him in there with one of, because they've done those little like
Actually, no,
cameos and
it doesn't
whatnot.
look like he was.
Okay. So maybe I was thinking of Sunfire, because I think they brought in Sunfire for a second, because I think when they were originally doing like part of the like the Phoenix Saga, they did like a flash like all around the world. I think Captain Britain showed up. Um, I think Sunfire was there. I think they showed some Alpha Flight members, I want to say. Um, and I think also there was like a moment where some shit was gonna collapse on a civilian and like Spider-Man pulled somebody out of the
Yeah, I
way.
remember that
So they
one.
wanted to show that it was like a big, event.
Oh, that was the big
So
four-parter, something beyond. I can't remember, but I remember the big thing I always remember was that Psylocke was in there, and like
yeah.
Psylocke is like comic book perfect, and I'm like, God damn it, why couldn't Psylocke have been more of the show? And apparently it was mostly because of Psylocke's costume. They were like, yeah, we can't approve that. It's like we're
Um,
making you billions of dollars. Hey, you want to put Psylocke in there? Cool.
yeah, but like if you like, again, like bringing it back to like Goblin Queen, if the merchandise, which I do
Apparently the
have by the
merchandise does not
way,
represent her design. They actually,
really?
yeah, because they said apparently they haven't confirmed it, but apparently the big hint is that they said that if they went by her design, they wouldn't be able to put it in general market stores.
But I have the figure,
I know,
and they're not
but
gonna they're not
because
gonna keep it the
apparently they're
same.
hinting that it's going to be the original design,
Okay.
which I give
Um,
them credit for because that's really ballsy if they're doing that.
well, they did show. Speaking of things that get changed, like in the credits, they did add Emma Frost
I
to
know
the lineup, which was pretty cool. They Who did they remove? They removed like some random little dude. Um, I don't know who it even was. It was like some like big headed dude. It almost looked like Leader or like Leech or something like that.
Wiener Bob.
Um, but they threw in Emma Frost, and I think they added somebody else, right? They added somebody else. They kept most of the original like Brotherhood lineup, which was good, and they threw Emma Frost in there. I'm sure she's gonna have a lot more to do. So yeah, so going back to so can we talk about how they put some respect on Cyclops?
Yeah, and also I want to talk about how good a job Ray Chase did as Cyclops.
I kind of
Excuse
thought,
me.
I know there's been some of the folks that like got brought back, Cal Dodd, who played Wolverine and the old one and the
They
new
brought back
one,
most of them. People don't realize because they brought
and there
back
was,
George Buza.
yeah.
Brought back Alison Seeley as Storm. They brought back Alison Seeley Smith, which really enough she doesn't have an IMDb photo, which I find very strange. Um,
Hmm.
they brought back Cal Dodd. They brought back Lenore Zam. Um, and funny enough, Catherine Disher, who played Jean Grey in the original show, while she doesn't play Jean Grey here, she is the voice of Val Cooper, the government liaison for the X-Men.
Yeah, and doing like the rewatch, it was always kind of like funny whenever you had like a side character or like a soldier, like obviously voiced by one of the X-Men. That happened a lot for the original voice actor for Cyclops because he had that very like kind of like military, like stand up Boy Scout type of voice, and he would just kind of like show up as like a random guard or something at a prison. You're just like, that's Cyclops, man. What are you doing?
Well, weirdly enough, Alison Seeley Smith, she played another character in the in X-Men in a one-off episode, but it worked so well that I'm not going to complain. She was Chandra, the external years episode, the Gambit one.
Oh yeah, that was such a weird. Like I said, am not somebody who read a lot of the '90s
It's a weird episode
comics.
because they freaking compressed a four-issue miniseries into one episode.
I was like, how accurate was that? to
No, it
the
was pretty accurate.
comic.
It was pretty accurate. Gambit's story
Um,
is odd, but it's basically a trilogy of miniseries for Gambit and
that
Rogue.
was just so
And
weird, though. It's like, oh, like we've got a thieves guild and we've got an assassins guild,
oh
and
no,
we're
that
trying
was
to
that was all
vie
in the comics.
for the favoritism of this external, who is like a thing that we're not really going to explain that well. But yeah, there it is.
I'm gonna be honest, the first episode, while we had some really great moments, the first episode's story was not the strongest. Like it was
So
good, but it was literally just your it was in many ways it was your standard introduction slash reintroductory episode. But I'd really have
yeah.
a lot to say about the second episode.
Um, so like before we get to the second episode, I'm just glad, like you're saying, it is obvious that they were trying to kind of like, especially, it's almost like the way that I would kind of describe like the first like bit of the mansion scene. The first time you see the X mansion was very much like um, it was like Serenity. It was like
Yeah,
Serenity when they're having to go through, the ship, and that you have that single shot or what appears to be a single shot. I know you're not the biggest Whedon fan right now, but it's kind of like South Park. He might be, a personal douchebag, but that son of a bitch knows story structure.
yeah,
So as he's like going through the that single shot, he gives you like just enough of like each character and like their interactions like between each other to like let you know and to like catch you up with anybody who didn't see the original show, who that person is and like what they're about and what their place is within that whole like found family dynamic. And so there was a lot of that with the with that first scene in the mansion. They show you that Wolverine is like the cocky, don't fuck with me type guy. Gambit is like chill out. He's like the hippie gumbo guy. They show you that Jean is there
Gumbo,
to be, yeah, Jean is there to be. She's like the den
hillbilly.
mother. Um, Cyclops is obviously the ball busting leader and all that, and they give you like just enough of that to like let you know who everybody is, and on some levels it does you can kind of feel it, especially on the second watch. You can feel like, oh, like you're just kind of like having to like touch base with everybody. So it's definitely going to be something where it's very welcome and very interesting to see how they're going to like let the rest of the episodes breathe and let us have those like character centric episodes. But they definitely it felt like the Cyclops got the center stage
Yeah,
for the first
definitely.
episode, and
Oh,
I think
dude,
that was
the airplane scene. Well, I forgot. Was that the first episode or second? That was the first episode, right?
that was first. That was the first one. So
God, that was amazing. Holy shit! And the scene at the
so
warehouse at the beginning of the Friends of Humanity.
my boy Cyclops. So one thing that you definitely, if you're a Cyclops fan, which I have been since like the original show, a lot of people give me shit about like liking Cyclops. So I'll be part of like groups that are like Cyclops core groups, and sometimes I'll post memes like from that to my page, and people are like, "Oh, you actually like Cyclops?" And I'm like, "That's my fucking boy right there." And that's just me. I just always like tend to gravitate towards like more practical, like leader type characters. And like I'm a bigger, I want to say like a bigger Doctor Strange fan from the MCU than I am an Iron Man fan, because like he is just like he is on his shit. He is a pure professional about what he does, and he gets shit done. So that's how Cyclops is here. And really, Cyclops is at his best whenever Xavier isn't around. And I feel like that's true for the comics, that's true for obviously here, and it's because,
I was,
he has to like
I'm
figure out.
sorry, real quick. I was
Yeah,
thinking
no
about this
problem.
from the comics. This is at the end of Inferno because they realized the reason his optic lenses were made by Sinister is because Sinister knew he could kill him. And well,
Yeah.
yep, that skeleton right there, that's Mr. Sinister.
And they kind of touched on that a little bit in the OG when he was the only one who could like really like
Like
damage
who just
him.
started fucking him up on the beach
Yeah,
and
but he
he
just
said
like, why would you like bring him here? And why would you? It was kind of like the same fucking scene like in the beginning where they
it's
like took
like
away his
Darwin. He's like
visor.
ironically enough proving Darwinism wrong.
Yeah. Um. So yeah, I really I like Cyclops a lot. He's been my favorite since the beginning. Not just because like he's in charge, but because like it's because of shit like him having to deal with Xavier not being around, him having to kind of go through this thing where he's kind of like having to figure out what it means to be the true leader of the X-Men, and also like what it means to be the one who kind of like carries that torch, and what does it mean to be the face of mutantdom for the world basically, and like try to like really live up to be the pinnacle, to be like the ideal. So he has to carry that weight, and obviously it impacts him a lot. It's something that he's going to talk about the most with Jean because that's his wife. But he was handled so well in this first episode, not just from that characterization standpoint, but like the action standpoint. He was using his like geometry to move himself around. He was throwing hands like everybody was excited to see him do like an X2 because James Marsden was like, "Hey, can I actually fight somebody?" And
And then immediately
Bryan
gets his
Singer's
ass
like,
kicked
"Yeah, sure,
afterwards.
let's fucking do it. Yeah, let's have you actually fuck somebody up with your hands, so that way you're just not like the point and shoot guy. You can fight. Like
Punch
Cyclops is
collapse.
like for real. He is like he's fucking jacked as shit. He's like full on cum gutters. He knows what he's doing. Like they fight. They know how to fucking fight. They're X-Men. They aren't dependent on like just their powers. And he's got one of the coolest like it's such a simple power, but it's so fucking cool, and they definitely showed it for the whole scene where the so first of all, like the X-Jet has to have like the best or the worst insurance policy in in all of like comic book
It's
vehicle
probably the same one they
history.
have for the mansion.
Because like that shit, because everybody was just like so casual. They didn't even be like, oh no, the X-Jet. They're just like, yep, it's Thursday. The X-Jet's getting destroyed.
Hey guys, the
Let's go
mansion
through
exploded again.
let's go through our X-Jet has been destroyed protocol that we
Ah,
had to rehearse a
there it
thousand
is.
times.
Just see
They're
like
just like
funny to see
they
it go to the back. Hey,
they they're
there
not
you
even
go.
surprised. So they're not even surprised a little bit, and I love the fact that there's just like this oh shit, like they don't have to say anything. The X-Men don't have to say anything to each other. They're just like, okay, let's go. You get him, you get her. Cyclops is gonna do his thing to land himself. We're all good. This is nothing. So uh yeah, that was pretty badass. And like the whole sequence at the end, where they're fighting like the Master Mold, right?
Yeah.
So you could tell that they were like, we have to get this fucking scene right, this action scene right. This
So
is
fucking
something
awesome.
that they probably had like brewing for like 25 years. Because like when you do a rewatch, like I was doing, you kind of notice that some of the action scenes are not as polished or not as well thought out as you would think, as you would want. And I mean, that's just like something that can happen when you have such powerful characters. So how do you kind of make that as dynamic and interesting and well shot when you've got like so many of them? And you would often see like in the OG show, they were broken off into like groups of like two or three because if they were all there, this shit would like be over in 2 seconds if they really
Also
thought
be
about it.
really expensive.
Yeah. So here they actually got to fucking do that.
Dude,
Rogue was like body slamming
dude,
Sentinels.
Rogue did a fucking Randy Orton move against the Sentinel. And then
She
decapitated said
did.
Sentinel that she did a Randy
She
Orton move.
did.
And then she threw the Sentinel head at another Sentinel.
And fucking like Beast was like
He's fucking
he
puppeteering the shit out of the
rewired
Sentinel.
and fucking did like a Pacific Rim Jaeger
Yeah.
turned the Sentinel into.
Except with much better dialogue than Pacific Rim.
So
People get mad at
so
me.
yeah,
I used to defend the hell out of that movie. I'm like, this is a very fun movie with terrible dialogue. Like,
hey
all the
now,
dialogue is made in Drive the Straightforward, and that's all.
whatever you want to say about the first Pacific Rim,
We don't
save
talk
that
about
negative
part two.
energy for the sequel.
Part two never
Save for the
happened, sir.
sequel.
I don't know what you're talking about. John
Yeah.
Boyega did
So
fine and never made any bad movies ever. Rise of
you,
Skywalker didn't happen.
if I, if they, let's say this just real quick about Pacific Rim. If there was some kind of like, dirty like leprechaun who needed his dick sucked to have Pacific Rim 3 happen with the whole original like creative crew back, I would
Michael,
be
I'm gonna go
like,
find that leprechaun.
I would be like, this, my boy Ian will suck your dick off to make this
Hey,
movie happen.
that's not true. Probably.
So, that just basically like Jay and Silent Bob, and just like this guy over here, this guy will suck your dick off to make this happen.
So
So
speaking of
anyway,
not that, speaking of Matthew Watterson fucking killing it as Magneto in episode two.
so that was really okay. Wait, one second. There are a couple of lines of dialogue
I'm sorry.
in the first episode that I thought were really great. One of them obviously went to Cyclops when he was like quoting Xavier when he was like, he would always tell me that trust happens when actions meet words. That was a really good line. The other really good line, I think, actually came from Oliver Trask to
Hey,
kind
real
of
quick,
like exemplify what their beef
Michael,
was with the mutants.
real
What's
quick,
up?
we're gonna come back to that because I'm actually going to stop recording for a second. I'm gonna take Cosmo out real quick because I think he needs to go out. I'll be right back.
Go.
All right. So you said that there were a couple. You said that there were some specific lines from Cyclops that really stood out to you in the first episode.
Well, there are a couple of lines, and let me take a look at my notes real quick. Um, so a couple of lines, yeah, right. So I think I started talking about ones where he told to Dr. Cooper, who was I think we were talking about this a little bit before we finally got her rolling, is that she seems like a new addition for the show. She's almost like if you've read some other Marvel comics, you can kind of see that like Gyrick wasn't always like a piece of shit. He was often like a liaison to the Avengers and other superhero groups and whatnot, and it seems like that's what they're doing with Doctor Cooper for the UN and being a liaison with the X-Men. But she's kind of Cyclops gives her some shit, which he kind of has to because that's his role as a leader. He tells her, trust happens when actions meet words,
And
and
and with
that's a
Val Cooper,
very
she's the
important
kind of
thing.
person who puts her job first. So
Yeah,
if she needs to basically shut down the X-Men, she's going to shut down the X-Men.
yeah, and it's kind of good that we're having that character here too because another big show that's out right now, obviously, the animated superhero verse is Invincible, and you have another character like that, like Cecil Stedman, who's like the head of like the Global Defense Agency, and so I'm glad that they're keeping that aspect of it in. They're kind of showing what it's like when the X-Men are kind of starting to be a little bit more legitimate when they're trying to work with the government and what happens with that. And you can tell that the other shoe is going to drop at some point because that's just how it always goes with the X-Men. So that's one of my favorite lines. Another line of his is when he's he basically does like enhanced interrogation of Gyrick, and
Oh, that was so fucking awesome.
he's like, "Have you met my wife?" And that's something that he always likes to say. He always likes to that's like his pull his dick out and throw it on the table moment with like everybody when they went through the whole Judgment Day thing, when he was shit talking a Celestial, he was like, "You better hope you never meet my wife, bitch, because she'll fuck you up." Um, and she does kind of she goes after Gyrick,
By the
and
way, did you get
there
Judge
was
Dredd 2012 vibes from that scene with the psychic?
I there was that, and also I thought it was also very reminiscent of like Sarah Connor from T2, how she was having like that vision, and they even have that moment where she kind of gets like wiped away by this little psychic blast and whatnot. So I thought there was some hints of it there, but I think maybe there were a couple of lines that were possibly like more important, and they didn't come from the X-Men, they came from the bad guys. And one of them was from Gyrick, who said he was like talking shit to Storm and talking shit to Cyclops, the leaders of the X-Men. And he's basically telling them, you know, however much like you guys are advancing and how much you guys are like growing into the world, you're taking that away from the normal people. You're taking that away from us. You know, if you're trying to say that you're the next step and you're going to be what's new and what's next, basically like fuck you, we were here first type of shit. And that very much like touches on like some of the themes of the X-Men, where like the whole like xenophobic, it's kind of like boiling it down to make it even more relevant, because you hear that same kind of shit today that's being said to minorities, being said. And one of the things that he kind of boils it down to is he says like, oh, like, yeah, we might pretend to be tolerant, but tolerance is extinction. So there are people who kind of feel that same way about, other minority groups who say like, oh, like, we're being bred out. We're gonna be extinct, and it touches on that, and it makes it more relevant because you can see like
Yeah,
hints
like
of,
the MAGA people.
yeah.
Yeah,
So, and by the way, all the Friends of Humanity look like they have very murky January 6th alibis.
which we have to talk about
So
in the second episode. That's what I'm really excited to talk about the second one.
definitely. And that's kind of like that line was really important. And then another line from like Bolivar Trask, where he was just basically saying like, um, you guys are the future, and you don't know what it's like to feel like you're like gonna be wiped out. So I feel like that's not only important to see, to have that line from Gyrick that's basically saying like, oh, the minorities are encroaching, but that sense from Trask, who's also saying like the future is encroaching. There's that other angle to it, to be like, we have to stamp out the future, because the more the future is coming, the less room there is for like people who think and are and who exist the same way that I do. So it's not just a like a potential like parallel between like race and people, with in the minority groups for sexuality, but it's also, I think, a generational statement also, to say like, we have to keep the new generation, the new, we have to keep them down, because you're taking it away from us old guys, because you're going to wipe us away, and you're going to wipe away our way of thinking and our way of
It's
living.
paranoia and boomers, man.
Yeah. So I think it's really important that, we kind of underscore those lines, because there are so many people who claim to be X-Men fans who are just like, why is it so woke now? And
It always
stupid shit
was.
like that. Yeah.
X-Men
And
always
so
was, man.
I think,
It's literally the legacy virus. It was an AIDS metaphor written only a couple of years
yeah.
after AIDS became a pandemic.
And so to see that, I think it's really important that you see those parallels, because it's not just as important to see and to understand like who the good guys are, but it's important for the show to kind of show us who the bad guys are, like what they believe. And I think it's really important for this like new generation of people who are going to be picking up on it, as well as the old generation who's like tuning into this now, to kind of like re-examine themselves And it's kind of like what's happening with Star Wars, to be like to show
Are we
us,
the
oh,
Empire?
like these, yeah, like is fascism bad? And
Are we
it's
the
the same
Friends of
thing
Humanity?
here with these like fucked up guys who are just like, oh, like these guys who are like, oh, like about like bigotry and keeping down minorities and keeping down like the new
They all look like
generation
MAGA
and
people in the original show.
for
Like,
real.
I,
So
I,
I think it's important to have those moments where we're showing like what the bad guys are about so that people can look at it and say like, yeah, that's these are the bad guys.
can
These are
we
the fucked up people.
can we touch on how interesting a villain Bolivar Trask is in the animated series compared to the comics? Because Bolivar Trask, unlike Gyrick, like the fucker created the Sentinels, and even he's like, dude, calm down. Like
Yeah.
rewatching the first episode of the animated series, he's like, why are you interrogating mutants here? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And like fucker basically calls out Gyrick for the first episode. And it's so interesting because even that scene you talked about, oddly enough, his has some sense of rationality, even though it's awful.
Yeah.
Where Gyrick is just awful. And I think it's so funny how Bolivar Trask, who was basically Robo Hitler in the original comics when he was first created, is like, dude, I'm doing some shady shit. But what the fuck, Gyrick? Stop
He
that.
was like the Mike Pence to Guy Ricks Trump. And he's just like, dude, we're not supposed to say that part out loud.
I give him credit though. He got a lot of power in 10 years since like 10 years back. But you know what? Let's just not talk about that joke. Let's move that joke away from the table.
So yeah, let's. I'm sorry. I wanted to make sure because I do see like we're both like pulling up. We're both taking a look at the show on IMDb, and I did see that the first episode has a lower rating than the second episode, and that's I think that just because the second episode is so
It's
strong.
so fucking good.
People
Oh my
love
god.
Magneto. Obviously, if Magneto didn't have like the same kind of like no pun intended because I fucking hate puns. If he didn't have like the same kind of attractive attraction, um, then we wouldn't have allowed him or seen him carry like the second trilogy of X-Men films, starting with First Class and all that. So there's obviously a lot of really good dynamics to that character. People feel that pull to him. So it was really great to see that side because it ends. The first episode ends with Xavier left the X-Men to Magneto, and that's kind of like a big. Obviously, that's gonna impact Cyclops a lot because he thought he was king shit for like 3 seconds. Um, but yeah, please talk about season or not season, but episode two.
So episode two is amazing. I'm just gonna say that right now. And one of the things I do appreciate so far about the show is that the writer, who we're gonna talk about later, Bianca DeMaio, not Bo DeMaio, that apparently he wrote every single episode of the season, which does that ever happen with any TV show, where one person writes every episode of the show. I think the only other one I could think of is J. Michael Straczynski on Babylon 5. And there are even a couple he didn't write on that show.
I'm sure
So
it's happened. What about Andor? Did Gilroy, did he write all of Andor?
he did, but wasn't Andor also a miniseries?
I mean, there's gonna be more. There's gonna be more seasons.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I haven't actually finished it. I fell so behind all the different Star Wars shows. There's so much of it.
You haven't finished Andor?
No, I haven't. I haven't finished Ahsoka, and I care a lot more about Ahsoka than Andor because of various reasons. Um,
Andor was better. Andor was better.
I know that's what I've heard. I have my biases. Um, but I'm gonna say this right now. Matthew Watterson's performance as Magneto is really interesting because it almost reminds me of a mixture of Michael Fassbender from the X-Men movies mixed with elements of the animated Magneto.
Mhm.
And the scene we're going to talk about later on, about midway through that episode, it really gave me vibes of the scene with him and the of him in the jet in Days of Future Past.
Yeah.
But this episode's amazing. This episode hits on nail on the head what the point of the X-Men is.
Yeah.
The moment where where Magneto is well, he is on trial, which is one of the classic stories, one of the classic post Dark Phoenix stories, the trial of Magneto, where he's even wearing the exact same costume with a big old M on it. And although
Subtle as fuck.
funny enough, because of 80s, like he is so jacked to the level where his pecs are just kind of sticking out the side of it. So anyone
Yeah.
who is like complaining or not complaining about Magneto, it's like go look it up at the comics, man, because there's gonna be a whole different fandom now after they see Magneto the Trial of Magneto.
Just like it's just like Cyclops, man. Like he's rocking the cup gutter.
But but God damn it. The but yeah, Matthew Waterson is amazing as Magneto, and it's kind of weird when you look at him and like the actor actually looks like he kind of looks like Magneto, kind of like the
Yeah.
original Gambit, where it's like you just look like the dude. That's weird. And he's actually fairly well known as voice actor. Like it's not one of those where you immediately know his name, but he was in Fallout 4. He was Virgil in Fallout. He was in Uncharted. He was in What If, where he was the voice of Rusty in one of the episodes from season two. I have not caught up with season two because there's so much content right now. I'm not gonna lie, I just skipped right to this because I'm like, this is something I really want to watch. Um, but yeah, he absolutely steals it. And there's a moment, and I think this is the moment that everyone's talking about, where he basically says, "I did everything you wanted me to do. I did everything you told me to do.
Oh,
I
the
did
Kuna in
everything
Jedi
right."
Survivor, which was good.
But like then he has that moment where it's like, and you still do this to me. You're still putting me on trial. And it's like, it's what the fuck. Like this episode got me. This was actually really, really emotional, which is part of what really did surprise me with the show because they never hit that high in terms of the original show, with few exceptions.
Yeah, they. So I'm gonna make a weird reference. Not necessarily a weird reference. Sorry if I'm kind of like popping off there for a second, but I'm gonna plug my laptop in. So this was almost like Mean Girls for me. So and somebody was asking me the other day about Mean Girls, and they were kind of like talking about the more updated version that we
I
just
haven't seen
got,
it
the
yet.
musical rather, versus the OG. So with the OG Mean Girls, what I thought was kind of interesting about it is like you saw Regina George, who is Magneto for this scenario. You saw Regina George kind of like more so through the lens of like how everybody else perceived her. Whereas like in the new, more musically inclined version, which is kind of like based off of like the Broadway version, she does get like her own like spotlight songs where she kind of like explains her motivations, and it gets like makes her a little bit of like a fleshed out character. And there's like good parts and bad parts of that, because I think there are interesting aspects to like kind of tackle when it's very like boiled down and like black and white of like how like for Magneto or Regina George is just like a plain like evil person, because that's what we've heard and that's what we've been kind of interpreted, and that's what other people have, you know, kind of, that's all we've seen, versus some her having to actually like explain why she does what she does and like how she thinks things through. And there was a little bit of that in the original like X-Men show for Magneto, but here you got to see like his full kind of like thought process on it, because he had to really like exemplify if he was actually better. And that's something that I think that, you know, you're seeing a lot of like in the Krakoan era, when we talked about this a little bit, how like villains kind of just showed up like in the Krakoan era, and because of the way that they handled that in the comic books was they gave like a blanket amnesty to the mutants, villains included, and can consider them all like Krakoan citizens. So you had to kind of like deal with, you know, villains kind of like becoming more of like neutral parties and having to like walk around and be like normal people, whereas this was like it wasn't even that. You had somebody who wanted to like take away Magneto's powers. You, if not only like not just his powers, but his freedom, his life, everything. So to have Magneto like challenged in that way, and I really thought for a second that he was just gonna fucking murder the shit out of everyone. Like
Yeah.
he took everybody into space, and I was like, oh fuck,
Yeah,
he
because
is gonna throw.
Val Cooper's a main character, and I'm like, um, bro,
I was
stop
like, are you
that.
about to throw them in the sun? Are you about to throw them in the sun? But that didn't happen. And he had to kind of like show like he was beyond like the human pettiness because he was like, you know what? And I think this is actually like drawn from the comics. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I've seen like panels that people have like referenced and shown like from the show and how like it was inspired by it from the trial of Magneto, where he was just like humans do such terrible and fucked up things to each other. And you guys have like tried to take away everything from me. Like I said, you tried to take like my freedom, my powers, my life, and I am fully within my rights to just like use what I've got to wipe you from existence.
Yeah,
But I'm not going to do that because I'm better than you.
and it's seriously one of the greatest things ever. And can we talk about the fact that that this show doesn't fuck around when it comes to basically showing the worst of humanity to our faces.
Like speaking of murky January 6th alibis, damn, if
It
that wasn't,
happens,
yeah,
and
they
apparently,
were storming the UN and calling them traitors for just for holding a fair trial,
yeah. Oh, and we
for executing the the law, and
speaking.
they didn't care about rolling up on police officers and assaulting them and storming government buildings,
Yeah,
which yeah, like how again, it's like you can't make the argument that this is just now just because the reference is new doesn't mean that like the message is new. This is still the same type of bigotry and hatred that they've been facing since day one. It's like if they're calling it woke, maybe it's because you need to wake the fuck up.
I we need to talk about Executioner
I
because
was ready to not like this guy because I didn't know who the fuck he was, honestly. But you know, he was holding his own.
I actually think it's cool that they took Executioner, who was a lesser known character from the comics. Like he's shown up a number of times, but he's very much a character from the '90s. You can kind of tell with his design. But I will say this: his design translates out to animation really, really well.
He's almost got like he's almost got like a Deathstroke vibe.
Yeah, because and it's always I've noticed it's always artists who have that very unique style to their work who tend to use this character. Like this is the guy. This is by the guy who actually created the character.
Yeah, he's lucky my boy Colossus wasn't there.
Well, he kind of was.
Kinda. But like, god damn it, Morph. Like if you could like be and like automatically have the powers of like these other mutants and shit, like why are
Why are
you
you
not
standing around?
automatically ending all these fights? And that was definitely tough, I think, to have to put a character like that in there. I'm kind of glad that he's not like hanging around forever. Obviously, he's probably going to come back. Um, but it's good to see somebody like formidable and somebody who is kind of like having to outthink them. You're seeing a lot of that now with like Orcus in the comics. So I feel like they're planting the seeds for that. And yeah, talk about what happened to our girl Ororo.
So, so here's the interesting thing. In the original comic, Executioner, his weapons are actually taken from other supervillains, the X-Men, because he was a CIA agent, and one of his other CIA agents was murdered. He was murdered during this fight with supervillain. And he basically got caught between it. And so what he decided was, well, shit, mutants did this, and he found out that his fellow agent was extremely anti-mutant. Not only was he anti-mutant, but he was using his Where to actually collect weapons from different villains that the government captured. And so the weapons that he has are actually weapons from other mutant villains, which is actually kind of cool and honestly slightly cooler than the idea of I have Sentinel parts. I kind of wish he
Yeah,
got,
they were kind of doing this Mega Man shit with all of their little blasters. Um,
but but here's the thing. Storm gets her powers before it's taken away. That's one of the big things that people are talking about in this episode. And it's a direct reference to a comics X-Men story called Life Death. Because Life Death deals with the fact that Forge, Storm's lover at the time, designed the weapon that was used, not knowing that it was going to be used on her, and gave it to Val Cooper and the government. Mystique uses that weapon and takes away, and Mystique and Destiny take away Storm's powers. And they're gone for a couple of years. Like, it's not till Extinction Agenda in the 90s that she gets her powers back. But the great thing about it is that this is when she becomes the leader of the X-Men. Because she realizes she's actually stronger when she's more reliant on her own abilities as a person than she is on her powers. She fights Cyclops to a standstill in the 80s and becomes the leader of the X-Men without her
I
powers.
do remember that bit. Um, and I posted a little while back. There was, I think, not too long ago, there was actually a comic where she had her powers like temporarily taken away because like Orcus had these weapons and they hit her with one to kind of like temporarily take away her powers, and they're like, let's see what you can do now. And she pulls a knife on him, and she's just like, I am not defenseless. And I was like, oh shit,
I'm
she's
old, by the way. This is the comic. This comic is the one that came out when I was born. Which, considering my borderline obsession with Storm from X-Men, yeah, I guess it explains a lot.
just a little bit. But it does kind of set up like Forge coming back. He was in the OG for a little bit.
But he never really
He
directed content. Then he was always in the future, just doing future stuff, and be like, "Hey, Bishop, look at this."
what wasn't he part of X Factor though
Oh yeah, he was,
when
but
they
like
showed up?
he was actually the leader of X Factor for a
Yeah.
little while after Havoc. He became the leader of X Factor in the comics, and
No, I mean like
it's
in the show.
yeah. But here's the weird
Yeah,
thing:
yeah.
that run is by James DeMatteis, who wrote Kraven's Last Hunt, and nobody ever talks about that. And I'm like, the guy who wrote Kraven's Last Hunt had an X Factor run, but it came out after Peter David's run that everyone always talks about. And Peter David's X Factor is really, really good. Like, it establishes the X Factor you see in the show. But I'm like, that does kind of suck that you have someone like DeMatteis, who's freaking iconic comic writer and television writer, and nobody talks about his run of the book.
I mean, it's kind of like hard to tell like who's gonna like shake out historically. But that's why we got things like this now where people can highlight some of the creators who kind of flown under the radar.
And that's what I
So
love about
maybe
things
that,
like Marvel Unlimited, the accessibility of stuff
yeah,
like this, you know?
and they'll like they got everybody credited. You can look them up by creator. So if you like a certain person, you can just look up everything else they've done. Um,
Somebody got mad at
so
me because I said the DC Universe's app is borderline unusable compared to Marvel Unlimited.
I keep on wanting to like get the subscription for that one too. And then every time I cobble up enough money, I just ended up using it on somebody else, on something else, and I'm just like, I'll just buy it in trades because honestly, like the time for like keeping up with comics is a lot. Um, but as far as like the rest of the second episode goes, I'm glad they showed like the relationship between Storm and Jean Grey. Jean Grey. Um, they also showed like you're showing. Um, so now that we've kind of like settled the love triangle between Scott and Jean and Logan
It's like Wolverine,
and
stop being weird. You're
Jean.
200 years old. Okay.
Um,
There's a masturbating
Now
kid.
we
People
got
don't
to
believe.
have this new love triangle between potentially Rogue and Magneto and Gambit. Um, Gambit does not seem like he's going to be very happy. Who, by the way, I'm glad that Gambit stopped fucking talking about himself in the third person. Uh, because every time, like, he would just walk up to Rogue and he'd be like, Gambit is erect. And it's like, Gambit, sweet Jesus. Like I was telling my wife, like I was rewatching it, and one of the episodes, like he's like trying to like teach him how to play pool, and he's like, all you gotta do is charge up the tip. And I was like, what the fuck? Gambit?
Gambit's just horny all the time.
Like, Jesus Christ, man.
This is why we need HR Gambit. We have
I
everything
I
in this
hope
mansion except HR.
I hope that like with all the shenanigans that happens with like Jean and all that, I hope they bring in Emma Frost as a member of the X-Men so that she can like kind of be the HR almost to be like, okay, everybody, we're gonna cut through all of our bullshit.
Can we show the
Gambit,
one time
you're a
Gambit
creep.
talking about himself in the first person in the third person actually being awesome? Can we
Sure,
present that
let's
real
do
quick?
it.
What's up?
Everyone can relax. Gambit has returned.
Yeah, we just need to talk about that. But yeah, like I was saying, I think that was the one moment where I give Gambit a pass for talking about himself in the third person
Like, why does he have to do that though?
because he's
I'm
a
I'm
because he's a peacock.
he's something.
He's
Um,
like, you know what clothes I'm gonna wear? All of them. I'm gonna wear
he's
the
definitely
armor
a
and
cock
the
of some
headstock
kind.
and the coat and the bow staff for some reason and these these aces. It's like, so is it a practical thing? Do you have to? Do you need the cards to make your powers? No, but it looks awesome.
It,
It looks awesome.
fuck it. I have
That's my
this.
reason.
I
Gumbo.
Yeah, I've never really gotten the appeal of Gambit. I realize that must sound like blasphemy to somebody who's got a Gambit poster sitting next to him right now, but uh, yeah. No, I think maybe the third person thing is probably something that is immediately like, oh, okay, so this guy's a douchebag. Even as a child, when I'm watching this show, I'm like, fuck that guy.
One of our now I'm gonna make you slightly sad because one of the neighbor kids in our neighborhood she hasn't got to see any Marvel stuff. They don't have they and because of her various reasons, the MCU stuff is too intense for her, and we were like, here's an in between, and I loaned her X-Men the animated series. Her absolute favorite characters are Rogue and Gambit, and according to her, they are perfect, and Rogue is pretty and Gambit's hot. And when I said they get married in the comics, she was very very happy. That's all I'm gonna say. And I love
Well,
her opinion on Wolverine. I think you will too, because her dad, when we were all talking, because we were talking about basically the Age of Apocalypse episode before the Age of Apocalypse with Storm and Wolverine. She's like, I don't like that one. Why? Because Storm is with Wolverine. Wolverine should be alone because I hate him. He should be happy.
yeah,
And I'm
he
like, I
should
like this
be
kid. I like this
he
kid a
should
lot.
be he should be in the woods with the wolves, hiding from the scent of Cyclops' cum.
And I love that. Wolverine sucks, and I hate him, and he should be alone and not happy. And her
That's
dad.
his thing.
That's not nice. It's just, yeah, I hate him. I don't care.
That's his power is like superhuman loneliness.
Yeah. I will say this: if you have Marvel Unlimited, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Read the Gambit series, the Gambit two Gambit series, the Rogue series by Howard Mackie. You'll
I
understand why I
don't
like
know
Gambit.
if I'm gonna do that, sir.
It's drawn by Lee Weeks. The art is really pretty.
I'm like I said, I don't know if I could do that, man. I've tried with the app to kind of like dive into certain characters that like I haven't really cared for in the past. Um, and it can be a struggle,
I do
especially
appreciate
when I
the
know I have like all these options for reading about characters who aren't like third person douchebag. I am so sorry.
It's all
But
right.
yeah,
Everyone's allowed to be a hater sometimes.
yeah, I will be a hater. Was so speaking of being a hater on Gambit, um,
Magneto.
during the during the first episode where like Rogue is like where she's watching the people interact in the club and she's like, "Man, I wish somebody would love me." And Gambit's just sitting right there next to her and he's just
Look
like,
at somebody. Look at someone awesome.
he's like, I'm somebody." Okay, yeah, I don't know, man. Like yeah.
Dude, I'm just messing with you now. I know Gambit's a douche, but
He's
I like
so
Gambit.
he's so fucking edgy. He just tries so hard.
The most Gambit moment ever is when in the series, you have a bunch of soldiers who are about to basically just shoot the shit out of them. And they have this brilliant idea of let's put him against let's put between this guy and the statue and us. This is gonna work out, right? Motherfucker puts his hands on the statue of this woman and starts charging the shit out of it. But because he's between them and the statue, they don't see what's happening. And they're just like, okay, he's got his back to us. We're going to just kill him. He leaves on the way at the last minute. This statue has been fully charged and it just explodes and takes out like everybody. And I'm like, if
Yeah.
Gambit was more creative like that in the cartoons, I think Gambit would be somehow a little bit less douchey.
I mean, I hope they de-douchify him, and
I
that's
could see
kind
them
of
doing
like
something like that with him in the show based on what we've seen so far.
yeah. So kind of like what I was like mentioning before is like you were saying as well, like the first episode, they're very much like establishing like the characters again. They're reintroducing them for like a new generation of fans, and like starting everybody off again. Even though it's a continuation, they're just like they still have them in a spot where everybody's very much boiled down to their basics. So really, the second episode is definitely Magneto centric. So if that is any indication of like what they're going to be able to do with these character centric episodes, like the Storm one when she starts to like when they delve into what she's getting into after she left the team, that's going to be good.
Well,
You
apparently one of the
know,
episodes is called Life Death. So,
yeah.
yeah.
So that's going to be a good episode. They're probably going to do like a very character centric one next for Jean to show like what happened to Jean
Oh yeah,
after the whole.
that's not Jean at the door at all. Well, actually, that is Jean at the door. That's just not Jean Grey inside the mansion.
So it is very interesting to see like how they're gonna like reconcile like some of the weirdness from the comics and how they're gonna condense it, especially for somebody like me who is like even though like I'm an X-Men fan and I've read like a bunch of comics, there's just so fucking much. There's so much, and that's kind of the good thing and the bad thing because like it can be it can be very easy to feel like overwhelmed by the amount of X-Men content there is out on there, especially if you have the unlimited app. So, but like I tell people, the good thing and the bad thing about X-Men, and it really mostly the good thing is like there's X-Men for everybody. The X-Men have been around so long and they've been so popular for so long that they've touched on so many other genres. Like we were kind of like joking before, like in the chat, about, there's like this Riggs and Murtaugh dynamic between fucking
Bishop and
between
Cable.
Bishop and
Well,
Cable.
yeah, then why do you think the
Um,
Lethal Weapon saxophone follows Bishop around?
yeah, he just
It's like the guy's just chilling.
every time like Gyrick is like, I've got diplomatic immunity, and Bishop is like, not for
Oh,
me.
by the way, how cool is it seeing Bishop actually really use his powers? Because we barely seen him use his powers in the animated series,
Yeah, because
and
like
people
he's
are
got
sleeping on
basically
that
kind
moment.
of like he's got very similar powers to Shaw from the Hellfire Club.
And is
And
this me or are people sleeping on that moment with him and
yeah,
Gambit, where he basically just turns around? And I love it because this is the guy who's ready to kill Gambit because he's like, "Yeah, you're the guy who killed all the mutants, man." And in this first scene we see with him and Gambit, he turns him around, takes the brunt of the shot from the Sentinel, and then just absorbs it and shoots it back at the Sentinel. And I'm like, thank you for not just
yeah.
showing him fire guns, of which he has them, and we will
But
see them
that's
a
not
lot.
his thing. Like he's not just a fucking time traveling cowboy like this music would have you believe. Like every time, even though they called fucking Gambit Gumbo, you would see Bishop, there would be like this, twangy music playing in the background for Bishop, and it's like, why?
Probably the only time I'll ever agree with Rob Liefeld is when he talked about how the influence of characters of the '90s, and he said, "What is Bishop but Black Cable?" Like
And
what was like when he was for when he, I'm not gonna and I will give him credit when he first kind of showed up, he was basically Black Cable. So they're like maybe we should give him some character development.
yeah, and that's how he kind of felt like in the show a little bit. And honestly, I think that's part of the reason why, like I kind of like always dread whenever I think about going back and reading the '90s X-Men is that was like a time where so much was like focused on, the art and not so much the story, but also at the same time like it was so popular and so huge because of like what Jim Lee was doing and because the attention that he was bringing to the comic, that they kind of got up their own ass a little bit with their success. And it got so convoluted. There was like fucking like there were time travel, their clones going out and fucking about in space, and people being in like hidden cocoons, and it was trying to be everything. So that's what I was kind of saying. Like, that's the good thing and the bad thing about X-Men is they've touched on so many different genres. There's like cowboy X-Men, there's like sci-fi X-Men, there's space X-Men, there are fucking sewer X-Men. There's like every kind of X-Men that you can think of. They've touched that genre.
I'm gonna
But
tell you
it can,
if you want good '90s X-Men,
yeah,
even though I'm a huge Claremont head, one of the best post Claremont runs actually immediately followed him, and that was Fabian Nicieza on X-Men. And of course, everyone knows Fabian Nicieza. He did Cable and Deadpool. Like that was he did every issue of that series. He's writing Cable right now for Marvel. And he did the Juggernaut series from a couple years back, right at the beginning of Krakoa.
I think he wrote the Children of the Vault miniseries, um, that had Cable and Bishop
And
working
so,
together to take down the Children of the Vault, which was pretty cool.
and the great thing about this run is that unlike a lot of '90s comic runs and unlike a lot of comic runs today, it's basically him and Andy Kubert for 99% of the run. So you've got a really strong X-Men writer, and you've got an artist who's still really relevant and still really good, doing a X-Men just a straight X-Men run with the exception of maybe one or two issues.
Does does Bishop keep the Jerry curl the whole time?
Oh, dude, he keeps that so well.
I just want to make sure.
Why would he not? Wait,
Well,
you?
they took it away from him for
I
'97.
know it makes me sad. I mean, really, how could they? I mean,
I'm kind of curious, like why they did that. Like they traded off like the long hair for him, and they gave like Storm the mohawk.
I need to take one more
So
break before we wrap things up. Give me 1 second to pull this up for us. It's very important.
cool.
It's
This better not be fucking
You can be
Marvel me.
you always wanted to be beautiful, sexy, and 1, 2, 3.
Just let your soul go. Just let it shine through. Just let your soul, baby, feeling oh so silky smooth. Just let it shine through. Just let your soul go.
Soul Glow.
Oh my. Wow.
It's Bishop's styling,
Um,
man.
I guess.
You gotta let your soul glow.
I guess they were trying to like update his style. But I'm so glad that they didn't give him like the Killmonger look
Oh,
that they're
oh,
trying to give
every
every black character right
I was
now.
gonna say every non-creative artist gives every character. You mean like what they did to what they did to
Miles.
Spider-Punk? Oh, they did it to Spider-Punk, man. I'm like, what did you do to what did you do to this amazing person?
Yeah,
They redid Spider-Punk's hair and they gave him the generic freaking
the Killmonger.
Killmonger.
Well, at least Bishop didn't get done like that. Kind of like we're saying, like the good thing is they've had all this time to reevaluate and they're kind of like what characters got shortchanged, how could we do better with them, and we're seeing the positive product of all that thought, and that's what you want to see in shows and in properties where they're tapping into that nostalgia because they're actually doing some introspection and saying what can we do better than we did before, and they're pulling off. I can't wait to see the rest of it. How many episodes have they given this
10
first season? You
episodes. It's
remember?
actually the longest.
10.
It's actually the most
10.
episodes of any Disney Plus series for the first season.
Yeah. Well, y'all keep raising the prices on your fucking everything. Don't act like you don't have money to give us more episodes. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, I'm not gonna lie. I take advantage. I totally take advantage of the Black Friday deal. Dude,
So
I'm paying $3 a
me
month for
and my
Hulu and
wife are
Disney.
gonna try to go to D23 this year. So we'll see how that goes. That's definitely gonna be pricey. But I'm glad you're getting the deals. I'm hoping
I'm
yeah.
cheapy. Oh, we need to touch on something real quick before we get everything wrapped up. So Bo DeMaio, the creator of X-Men '97, was let go from Disney before the first season premiered, and a lot of people were concerned. Is this something in terms of the quality of the show? Because apparently Bo DeMaio has a reputation of being difficult to work with on his time both on The Witcher as a writer and on Moon Knight. And he was originally part of Blade. Like every show he's on for about 2 episodes. And I don't want to go into rumors here. You and I have discussed rumors about this prior. But I feel like in what's been said and what's come out, and the fact that the creator of the show, the head of Disney Animation, has said that this has nothing to do with any issues in terms of the quality of the product or any kind of. But that's all he said. He said that it doesn't have anything to do with the quality of the product. I'm interested, especially with the fact that the show is 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, a 9.0 on IMDb, which is unheard of considering internet and Marvel and Disney. And
it hasn't been review bombed yet by all those January 6ers.
No, the rating actually just went up. Like it went from an 8.8 to a 9.0. And
they like reported it and they're like, I'm in this episode and you didn't pay me for likeness rights.
I have a feeling where all of a sudden we're gonna see the Disney animation be like, "Hey, remember that joke when we fired you from the show, Rosa Mile? Remember when that happened? ah, you should probably come back though because it was a joke." When they start seeing those
I
numbers, I'm hoping
I don't think I don't think they're gonna bring him back.
because apparently he's written the entire first season, and about half of the second season.
So the reason why I don't think they're gonna bring him back is because I feel like they have to kind of like set a precedent. Like when they fire somebody, they fire somebody, or at least stick to what they've already established. I mean, you've seen them fire people who did things or said things that they didn't agree with. And then some of them are more heinous than others. Some of them are just been talk, and some of them have been actions. So I feel like they are pretty careful about that, and I don't think that they go through with it unless they plan on sticking to it no matter what. But even though that we're seeing such a strong first season back for X-Men 97, the good thing about the X-Men is like there's no shortage of people who love this property and who would love to take it over and to kind of like put their own like spin on it, and there's so many like angles on it that they could do, and there's so many people who who actually understand these characters, and when you understand them, it's not as hard to pull this off. So yeah, I don't think they're gonna bring him back, but it'll be okay.
I don't know. But yeah, like you were saying, it's like you were saying when you have the understanding of those characters basically in terms of pulling off a show like this.
Yeah, I think they'll find other people to take it over and handle it well. I know a lot of folks were, even though it didn't end the greatest, you can't deny that Game of Thrones was fucking huge and handled well, and some people thought that they weren't going to be able to handle it as well once they went away from it, from what was established, and they made House of Dragons. But even I have to admit, I was like, oh, please let this suck so that I cannot get drawn back into Game of Thrones. But that shit's House of Dragons has been pretty good. So I'm like, fuck, I got to get back into this. And you find new people to handle the source material, and it just works out. It can work out.
So I'm going to put this on you. Should we talk about the rumor?
Um,
Because
I don't think we need
Double
to.
Toasted and other media has talked about it.
I think we should let's wait and see like what happens at the end of the season,
Yeah.
because I don't think they're gonna bring him back. I don't think we necessarily need to like address like the rumors, because I mean what's done is done. They let him go. I don't think they're gonna bring him back. You might think that they possibly could because of the success of it. Um, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I mean, if they bring him back, then yeah, let's definitely delve into it, because if they bring him back, they're going to have to talk about like what happened, and they're going to have to like give time and give context to what happened so that people understand their decision to do the initial firing and the rehiring. So I don't think that's what's going to happen. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think we should kind of just like let's just leave the rumors alone, because that's what we said we would do publicly.
Sure. I will say one thing that Premiere or Entertainment Weekly, when they did their whole promo for the show, and they're like, Look at Morph, he's non-binary, and he has an interesting friendship with Wolverine." And I'm like, I'm assuming no one who worked on the show wrote that weird promo, because yes, he is non-binary, but they never bring it up. You see in his little bio at the end, and it's like, you mean his friendship with Wolverine because they're friends? That
It's
was
like, do
very
you
odd the way that they publicized that.
You guys make it sound like he turns into Jean as a little sex doll for Logan.
I mean,
You think he does that? He's just like, come on, man.
he's like, hey, Cyclops, remember the whole storyline with Psylocke? Hey.
I mean, what happens in Japan
Krakoa
stays in
stays in
Japan.
Krakoa.
Man, everybody in Krakoa was fucking everybody else.
Yep. But yeah, with Krakoa and orgies, let's bring this show to a
Tonight
close.
on Krakoa, everybody
Orgies.
gets laid. That's
Nightcrawler.
that's my
Nightcrawler's the dude.
PCU reference. I don't know how many people out there have actually seen
Yes,
PCU,
PCU is awesome.
but every time it's got Jon Favreau in it, by the way, who plays an absolutely unhinged stoner wino.
Jeremy Piven is
So-
Nightcrawler, just DJing in the corner.
But yeah, that's what I
Like,
think about
everybody
whenever
make
people-
mutants!
when everybody talks about orgies, as orgies do come up in common conversation, I just think of that PCU line because I saw that as a kid. As a kid, I didn't know what the fuck it meant to get laid.
It was
And
just
I
like
was just
Comedy
like-
Central all the time, that movie.
Why are they so excited about getting laid, mommy?
Are they gonna go to sleep? I'm so confused.
They're gonna lay down? What's happening? Is that what it means to drink beer?
But yeah, with that interesting send off, this is the newest episode of Circuit 42. I'm your host Ian. This is host Michael Wizard.
Good night, everybody. I definitely know what it means to get laid now.
And of course, you can find us on Circuit 42 on Instagram, Facebook, various other pages, and you can listen to us on Spotify and iTunes. And now you can watch us on YouTube.
Yeah, I'll have to get some. I have to get my Cyclops was right T-shirt,
Yep.
which are definitely going to be sold out now.
Yep. But yeah, with that, thank you for everybody for listening, and have a great night, everyone.